I walked into our bedroom and found a note. "I'm gone forever." My heart seized in that instant as if time itself had frozen, trapping me in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The words burned into my mind, a cold, final declaration that shattered the familiar warmth of our shared space. Trembling, I fumbled for my phone and, with dread mounting in my chest, checked our bank account. Every digit, every balance, confirmed what I feared most. Our life together, the security we'd built over years, had vanished along with her. In that gut-wrenching moment, reality split open, and I was left with nothing but silence, confusion, and a despair that threatened to swallow me whole. For 20 years, I had believed that our small apartment was a sanctuary, a place where love and trust intertwined seamlessly with the everyday rhythms of life. The soft hum of the heater on winter nights, the shared cups of coffee at dawn, even the quiet comfort of knowing she was there, these were the threads that wove our life together. But now, those threads lay in tatters, unraveling into a void of betrayal and loss. I sat on the edge of our unmade bed, staring at the neat handwriting on the note. It wasn't harsh or angry, it was almost apologetic in its brevity, as if she'd resigned herself to a decision that left no room for explanation. I replayed the scene over and over in my mind, the way the morning light had filtered through the curtains, the familiar scent of her perfume lingering in the air, and then this, a final goodbye left behind like a discarded garment. I couldn't understand how the love we had nurtured for 2 decades could collapse so suddenly into nothingness. After the initial shock ebbed into a numb kind of grief, I forced myself to confront the other undeniable truth. Our bank account was empty. Every carefully saved penny, every contribution we'd made toward our future, was gone. The numbers on the screen were as cold and unyielding as the note on the nightstand. It was as if she had taken not only the emotional warmth of our life but also every tangible piece of security that we had painstakingly built. My mind raced with questions. Had she drained our savings to start a new life? Had she left without a single word about our finances, our shared dreams? I spent the next few hours in a daze, the silence of the apartment amplifying the raw, echoing pain of abandonment. I shuffled through drawers and closets, desperate for any hint, any forgotten letter or photograph that might explain what had happened. Every corner of our bedroom told a story of intimacy, a scarf draped over the chair, the half-read book on the nightstand, and the framed picture of us on our wedding day. Yet, none of these offered solace. Instead, they magnified the void where her presence once warmed the space. Memories began to flash unbidden, fragments of laughter and shared secrets, moments when our love had seemed unbreakable. I remembered the long walks in the park during summer evenings, the dreams we had whispered to each other as we planned for the future, and the quiet assurances that nothing could tear us apart. Now those memories felt like echoes from a life that belonged to someone else, a life that had evaporated like mist in the morning sun. Questions turned into accusations. Had I been blind to the subtle signs of her growing distance? Had I missed the furtive glances she exchanged on the phone or the unexplained absences that had become more frequent? I scoured my mind for clues, a word spoken out of context, a hesitancy in her smile, the way her eyes sometimes darted away as if hiding secrets. Every recollection stung with the bitter taste of regret. I realized with crushing clarity that love, no matter how deep, can be marred by secrets and silent departures. The emptiness of the bank account wasn't just a financial loss, it was a symbol of every promise broken. I recalled the dreams we had planned, the small house with a garden, the family vacations to sunlit shores, the comfortable future we had both believed in. In one cruel instant, those dreams had dissolved into an inescapable reality, a reality where I was left to rebuild my life from the remnants of what we once shared. The betrayal was not merely personal, it was systemic, a dismantling of every foundation I had trusted. As dusk crept over the city, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a cup of cold coffee. My hands, still trembling, clutched the note as if it were the only physical connection to a past I couldn't fully let go of. The silence in the house grew oppressive, each ticking second a reminder that she was truly gone. I found myself reaching out, half in a desperate hope for a sign, a misplaced scarf, a lingering scent, that might suggest this was all some cruel misunderstanding. But the apartment was void of any such remnants. The finality of her departure echoed in every empty room, every discarded memory. In the depths of that night, I confronted a painful truth. I had been living in a world of assumptions, blind to the subtle fractures in our life that had been widening with each passing day. I recalled the evenings when she would sit quietly, her eyes lost in thought, and I dismissed it as the fatigue of a busy day. I had never imagined that her silence would one day speak volumes of her discontent, that the very love we had built could crumble beneath the weight of unspoken grievances. I felt a mix of anger, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I knew that the path ahead would be arduous, a journey through the labyrinth of loss, where every step was fraught with painful memories and shattered illusions. In that moment of utter despair, I resolved that I would not allow this devastation to define me. Somewhere amidst the ruins of our past, I had to find the strength to reclaim my identity, to piece together the fragments of a self that was now unmoored by betrayal. I spent that night in restless motion, pacing the length of our living room, my thoughts a turbulent storm. I made frantic calls to family members, trying to understand if anyone else had sensed the cracks in our union. But every conversation ended in silence or vague reassurances, leaving me alone with the inescapable weight of my loss. I wondered if our shared life had been nothing more than an elaborate illusion, a mirage built on promises that could vanish with a single heartless note. In the midst of this inner turmoil, I realized that the answers I sought would not come easily. The note had been her final act of departure, a stark punctuation to a chapter one had assumed would last a lifetime. I knew that the journey ahead would force me to face not only the betrayal but also the deeper questions about who I was and what I truly deserved. Was I merely a bystander in my own life, or could I rise above the devastation and redefine my existence on my own terms? As the night deepened, the apartment grew colder, and I found a fragile comfort in the quiet introspection that followed the initial shock. I began jotting down my thoughts in an old journal, words flowing in a mix of anger, sorrow, and reluctant hope. Each line was an attempt to make sense of the chaos, a desperate bid to reclaim a sense of control in a world that had suddenly turned foreign and unrecognizable. I ended the night with a promise to myself, to seek the truth behind her sudden departure, to understand the reasons that had driven her away, and to rebuild the pieces of my life that had been scattered in the wake of her leaving. The note and the empty bank account were not just symbols of what I had lost. They were the catalysts for a journey of self-discovery and healing. I knew that eventually I would have to confront the painful memories, the unanswered questions, and the scars of betrayal that marked every corner of our once shared home. Now, as I sit in the dim light of early dawn, with the first tentative rays of sun breaking through the darkness, I realize that this painful chapter is only the beginning of a much larger story, a story of loss, introspection, and ultimately renewal. I brace myself for the journey ahead, knowing that while the path may be long and fraught with heartache, it also holds the promise of rediscovery and the chance to rebuild a life that is authentically my own. In the long, silent hours after that shattering night, I slowly began to realize that the emptiness of our bank account and the finality of that note were not the end of my story, but rather the painful prelude to an unexpected new beginning. The days that followed were a blur of disbelief and reluctant acceptance. I found myself waking up in a cold, unfamiliar apartment I had hastily rented, a temporary refuge from the memories of our once shared life. Each morning, as the sun's weak light crept through the threadbare curtains, I confronted the raw reality. I was alone, abandoned, and left to pick up the remnants of a life that had once been full of promise. At first, every creak in the empty hall and every stray echo in the silence felt like a reminder of what I had lost. I would sit by the window with a lukewarm cup of coffee, lost in thought, trying to recall the moments when laughter filled our living room and when our future had seemed so secure. The memories stung sharply against the present, a constant reminder that nothing could restore the past. Yet, amid the overwhelming sorrow, I sensed a subtle stir, a call from deep within urging me to rebuild, to rediscover who I was beyond the wreckage of betrayal. I decided to seek help. Therapy became my reluctant sanctuary, a place where I could slowly untangle the web of emotions that had ensnared me. In a modest office with soft, muted lighting, I recounted the harrowing details of that fateful day, the note, the empty bank account, the silence that had swallowed up our dreams. My therapist, with kind yet firm words, helped me understand that while the pain was undeniable, it was also an opportunity, a chance to redefine my identity without the weight of lost illusions. Each session became a stepping stone in the arduous process of reclaiming my shattered self, teaching me that healing was not about forgetting the past but rather about accepting it and moving forward. As weeks turned into months, I began to establish a new routine. I started by revisiting old hobbies that had long been abandoned in the whirlwind of our busy married life. I dusted off a neglected guitar and relearned the chords to songs that once brought me solace. Slowly, the music began to fill the void left by her absence, its melancholic notes resonating with the fragments of my bruised heart. I found solace in the simple act of creating melodies, a gentle reminder that even in the silence of loss, beauty could still emerge. Work, too, became both a distraction and a crucible for growth. I threw myself into projects with a fervor that surprised even me. The long hours at the office, once a shared effort in building a future together, now belonged solely to me. Colleagues offered sympathetic glances and quiet words of encouragement, and though I felt exposed and vulnerable, I also discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. Slowly, I began to rebuild my professional identity, finding pride in accomplishments that were now entirely my own. Evenings became a time for quiet reflection. I took long walks through the city streets, watching as life went on around me, a constant stream of faces, stories, and fleeting moments of connection. I began to notice details I had once overlooked. The way the autumn leaves danced in the cool breeze, the soft murmur of conversations in the nearby cafe, the gentle glow of street lamps that lit up the dark corners of unfamiliar neighborhoods. In these solitary journeys, I discovered that while the pain of loss was inevitable, life itself continued, undaunted and ever-changing. One crisp evening, as I strolled along a quiet park path, I caught sight of an old friend from our past. A friend who, like me, had once believed in the permanence of our shared dreams. Over coffee in a warmly lit diner, we spoke candidly about the abrupt disintegration of my marriage. His words, though laced with pity, were also filled with a sense of pragmatic hope. Sometimes, he said softly, when something important is taken away, it forces you to see what truly matters. It's painful, but it can also be the catalyst for discovering who you really are. His insight resonated with me, planting a seed of determination to no longer allow betrayal to define my every moment. Encouraged by this new perspective, I started to explore other avenues for healing. I enrolled in a photography course, a pursuit that had always intrigued me but was never fully explored. Behind the lens, I learned to capture the transient beauty of everyday moments. The interplay of light and shadow on an old building, the smile of a stranger in a busy market, even the delicate frost on a window pane in winter. All these images became a visual diary of my gradual transformation. Each photograph was a small victory, a tangible reminder that even broken pieces could be arranged into a picture of hope. Over time, I began to see that the betrayal, however devastating, had stripped away the veneer of a life built on complacency. In its place, a raw, unvarnished truth emerged, a truth that, while painful, also carried the promise of renewal. I started to write again. What began as terse journal entries evolved into longer, introspective narratives where I confronted my fears, acknowledged my losses, and dared to dream of a future free from the shadows of the past. Writing became a ritual of catharsis, each word a step toward reclaiming the voice that had been silenced by heartbreak. It wasn't long before the healing process brought unexpected companionship. In a local book club dedicated to memoirs and personal essays, I met Lena, a woman whose eyes held the quiet wisdom of someone who had weathered her own storms. Lena and I struck up a conversation over a shared appreciation for the written word, and gradually our friendship deepened. With gentle patience, she helped me understand that while the scars of betrayal might never fully disappear, they could become symbols of survival rather than defeat. Her presence was a balm to my wounded spirit, and through her, I learned that vulnerability could be a strength, not a weakness. Yet there were moments when the past crept in unbidden. Late at night, as I lay awake in the stillness of my modest apartment, memories of that cold morning would rush back with a force that left me breathless. I remembered the meticulous way in which our bank account had been emptied, each digit a silent testament to the life we had planned together, and the finality of that note, its words echoing in the quiet darkness. In those moments, grief would wash over me in relentless waves. But I had learned, through countless painful lessons, that grief was not a foe to be vanquished but a companion on the journey toward healing. I allowed myself to feel it, to honor the love that had once been, and to understand that every emotion, even the most painful, had its place in the tapestry of my life. One day, driven by an impulse to finally seek closure, I visited the local courthouse to inquire about the formalities of divorce. Standing in a sterile office, I felt the full weight of finality, a document that legally severed the ties of 20 years. Signing those papers was not an act of defeat, but rather a symbolic act of liberation. It was a final acknowledgement that the person who had once shared my life was now gone, and that I was ready to forge ahead without the chains of what might have been. With a pen in my hand, I felt a mixture of sorrow and empowerment, a bittersweet affirmation that I was reclaiming my future, one signature at a time. The turning point, however, came one quiet Sunday morning when I received an unexpected package at my new apartment. Wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with a simple string, it contained a small leather-bound journal and a note that simply read, "For when you're ready to begin again." I recognized the handwriting as my own, scribbled during one of those restless nights when I questioned my very worth. The package was anonymous, yet it felt like a message from the past urging me to embrace the future. Opening the journal, I found that it was filled with blank pages, a promise of endless possibilities. I decided then that I would document every step of my healing, every triumph and setback, transforming my pain into a narrative of hope. As the seasons changed, so did I. My days became filled with the pursuit of small joys, a morning jog through the awakening city, an impromptu dinner with new friends, the comforting cadence of rain against my window. Each moment of beauty, however fleeting, was a reminder that life was still unfolding, vibrant and unpredictable. I began to see that the void left by her departure was slowly being filled, not by someone else, but by the rediscovery of my own passions and strengths. One chilly evening, as I strolled through a bustling street fair, I paused at a stand adorned with handmade crafts and vivid paintings. I found myself drawn to a canvas splashed with bold, defiant colors, a riot of life emerging from chaos. The artist, noticing my lingering gaze, struck up a conversation. In the sharing of stories, I revealed, in hesitant, halting phrases, the journey that had led me here. The artist listened intently and said, "Sometimes, the only way to rebuild is to see the beauty in what remains, and to create something new from it." Those words resonated deeply, echoing the transformation I was slowly undergoing. I left the fair with a small print of that painting, a tangible reminder that beauty and hope could emerge from even the darkest moments. Now, as I write these final words, I sit in my modest apartment, a space that is no longer defined by loss but by the quiet confidence of a man who has learned to walk again after falling. The scars of betrayal remain, etched into the fabric of my soul, yet they no longer dictate who I am. Instead, they serve as powerful reminders of survival, of lessons learned, and of the capacity to embrace life anew. I have come to understand that while the note left behind on our bed and the empty bank account once represented an unbearable end, they were also the catalyst that forced me to rebuild, to rediscover, and to ultimately rise from the ashes of what once was. In the stillness of early dawn, as the first rays of light begin to break through the lingering darkness, I open my new journal and write, "I am here. I have been broken, but I am not defeated. Today I choose to begin again." And with that declaration, I step forward into a future that, while uncertain, holds the promise of redemption, renewal, and the endless possibility of a life truly lived on my own terms. This is my story, a tale of unexpected loss, harrowing betrayal, and the long, winding journey from despair to self-discovery. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a reminder that sometimes, in the most painful endings, we find the courage to create new beginnings. As I close this chapter, I do so with gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength I have uncovered, and for the knowledge that, no matter how profound the darkness, there is always a spark of light waiting to guide us home.